Dr. V. Chandrasekhar is working as lecturer in philosophy in the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda College since 1996. He has been awarded the degree of PhD by the University of Madras for his work in the area Yoga and Analytical Psychology. He has been teaching Indian philosophy, Western philosophy, and recent European philosophy for undergraduate and postgraduate students. He has participated in many seminars and presented papers in a variety of topics. He has also reviewed 2 books in Ethics and Indian Culture published by the Tamil Nadu Textbook Society for Plus 2 course.
Welcome to the UGC series of lectures in philosophy, especially Greek philosophy part 1. So far I was discussing about the nature of philosophy with respect to particularly Greek thinkers like the Ionian thinkers or the philosophers of Miletus, and then we moved on to Parmenides, Pythagoras and others. But right now we will be dealing with the transition of Greek thought from metaphysics to positive science. Today we have 2 of our students who will be accompanying me in this discussion here. They are Mr. Vijay Sarathi.
Hello sir.
And Mr. Badri.
Hello sir.
Now what is this transition? What are we going to talk here? In the beginning stages, when philosophy started, especially in Miletus with respect to Thales, Anaximander and Anaximenes, the aim of those thinkers was to identify what the ultimate reality is. They were concerned with the ultimate stuff that governs the whole universe. But at a time when we had thinkers like Parmenides, they were more concerned with identifying the nature rather than what the ultimate reality is. Before them, thinkers of Miletus talking about what the ultimate reality is by naming something to be the ultimate and talking of how the world would have come from that. But now, having accepted a reality, thinkers like Parmenides and others try to see whether that reality has got some specific categories or criteria. This is when Parmenides said that reality is that which is. He called it as being. Of course, we also saw how this has been interpreted by various thinkers who came after him as idealistic thought or materialistic thought. I also explained about what idealism is in philosophy and what materialism is in philosophy. However, Parmenides never had any idea about idealism or materialism, we can say, because the distinction between idealism and materialism was brought up only much later than the time of Parmenides, especially after the time of Plato. So, thinkers feel that while Parmenides spoke of being as that which is, he also said that it occupies space, and this idea that being occupies space was taken up to be talking of a materialistic angle. However, people say that the idealistic mold of Parmenidean thought was brought out much later after the time of Parmenides. Now, the thinkers who brought the materialistic attitude of Parmenidean thought were the first, especially we see in the case of Empedocles and Anaxagoras. That is why people might have thought that Parmenidean thought leads to a materialistic idea, and that is when we went into the philosophy of Empedocles. Empedocles, we have seen, comes from a place in Sicily called Acragas. You can see the map here now. I have got 2 maps. I have shown it in the previous class. Anyway, I will just show it again. Where is this place? Acragas is part of Sicily. Originally, I have told you that the earlier Greece consists of places which are now part of Italy, Sicily, Turkey and the present day Greece. So, this Acragas, present day Sicily, there is another clear picture over here. Now, coming back to what Empedocles would have thought. Empedocles follows the Parmenidean thought. How? While talking of reality, the nature of reality, Parmenides says that reality is that which does not change, but this idea that reality does not change can be known by us only through reason. However, at the same time there is another philosopher called Heraclitus who spoke about change. stating that reality is that which changes. This kind of a opposite view, contradicting view, needs reconciliation, and that was brought about by Empedocles. How? He said, yes, nothing changes into nothing, but in our experience, day to day experience, we find lot of things changing. How to account for it? In order to do this, Empedocles for the first time in the history of philosophy spoke about 4 different entities. He said, if something is going to remain that which is and never change, then we cannot explain for the multitude of things that is there in this world. There is a variety of things in the world. How to account for it? In order to do that, Empedocles brings in 4 different elements. Of course, we call them as elements. Empedocles does not call them as elements, he calls them as roots of all. That is the basis for whatever exists in this world. The 4 roots that he called are earth, water, fire and air. He does not talk of ether, he only talks of the 4: earth, water, fire, air. This is what we see here. The basic idea of Empedocles is guided by the philosophies of Parmenides and Heraclitus. Objects as a whole begin and cease to be, while material particles of which they are composed are uncreated and indestructible. Now, if you have one particular object, one particular reality, that reality changing into something else is inexplicable. Instead, Empedocles talks of 4 different entities which are ultimate. The other things that we have in this world are nothing but the coming together of these 4. This is how he explains, because if there is going to be only one thing, then it is difficult for us to explain how that one became many. In fact, I have given one example in the last class, namely that of painting. While painting, if a painter is going to sit down for painting with only one color, say red, he cannot paint anything else apart from that which is in red. He cannot paint green leaves. Instead, if he has 4 different colors, he can combine them, and whatever predominates, that sort of color you are going to get on the canvas, if he is going to take 4 different colors. Similarly, Empedocles feels that if there is going to be only one principle, underlying principle, namely water as thought by Thales, or air as thought by Anaximenes, then we can't account for other things which do not have air or water in it. But now here, if you see the world, I have a variety of things which should be taken care of. That is why Empedocles talks of 4 different elements, and these 4 different elements are not created according to him. They are the ultimate stuff, whereas whatever exists in this world, they have been created, which means that which is uncreated combine with one another to form the other objects. Therefore, whatever we have now, whatever we experience now, that is created, it can be destroyed, whereas the basic elements, for namely the 4 basic elements, earth, water, fire, air, are not created, therefore, they are not destructible. Now, we see how he reconciles the Parmenidean thought with Heraclitus' thought, that is that there is something that is permanent, but there is also change, which also accounts for change. This is how Empedocles answers or reconciles Parmenidean thought with the thought of Heraclitus. Well, there is an example in one of the books that I have studied, where it says that whatever exists in this world is comprised of these 4. There is a good example here. Take for example, the burning of a wood. When the wood burns, you hear certain noises of spluttering of the wood. That is because of the presence of water in it. Then you are able to see the fire, therefore, there is water plus fire. Apart from that, when the wood burns, there is the smoke that emanates, that refers to the air, presence of air in the wood, and finally, after the fire is extinguished, you are going to have ashes, that stands for the earth. Therefore, there is a talk that Empedocles might have seen this kind of a wood burning and 4 elements coming out of it. Therefore, he should have concluded that there is the 4 elements which come together and form the whole word. Therefore, whatever we have is a mixing of the 4, and when the 4 move out, then there is destruction. This is how he is trying to explain the coming of the word and destruction of the word. But now, if the elements are going to come together and move away, what makes them come together and move away? If there are 2 objects here nearby, how will the 2 objects come together unless they are guided? We have 2 pens here. If the 2 pens are kept on the table, the pens remain where they are, unless somebody comes and brings the pen together or brings the pen nearer to another object, the pen is going to remain where it is. Similarly, when Empedocles talks of 4 elements having separate existence, separate nature, but coming together to form the world, then the natural question that comes to mind is how these 4 have come together. If this question had been asked with respect to the Ionian thinkers, Thales and others, they just explain it away by stating that the force is inherent, the force of movement is inherent in that object, namely why water becomes the word. Thales says that it is inherent, the movement of water to become the word is inherent in it. Similar is the case with respect to Anaximander and Anaximenes. But if there are going to be 4 elements and if the 4 are going to come together, then what makes them come? Empedocles says that this cannot happen by itself, because for him matter is dead and motionless. It does not move by itself, it requires something else for its movement, and what that is. Here he brings in 2 different entities, he calls them love and hate. You can see the slide here. The moving force behind the process of the mixing of the 4 elements, he, that is Empedocles, postulates 2 principles of love and hate, or harmony and discord, to explain the 2 principles of mixing and unmixing. When it is mentioned that the world is formed out of the mixing of certain things and the world is destroyed when the ultimate stuffs are destroyed, then there should be something that guides this. That guiding factor should be something that will hold throughout. What is that guiding factor according to Empedocles? Can it be that it is there within that? Here he says there are 2 things, namely love and hate. In fact, I will be showing at a later time how these 4 come together and go away because of this 2, namely love and hate. In fact, we can have an analogy with respect to human being, namely attraction and repulsion. Here attraction and repulsion is the basic feature of any human activity. When we are attracted, we move towards, and when we do not get attracted, we move away, we are repulsed. That sort of attitude is brought out by Empedocles here to explain why the 4 elements come together.
Sir, sorry for the interruption. I have a question on this. Why a governing principle is required in mixing and unmixing of these 4 elements? Also, why there are only 2 governing principles, namely love and hate?
Yes, Vijay Sarthi, your question is very relevant here, because when we talk of 4 elements which come together, definitely a question will raise as to why and how, what these elements are. The same thing you have asked here, I will explain to you. I have already said that, just look into the slide again. You have 2 principles, namely love and hate. These are the 2 principles which govern the 4 elements to come together. Now, you also ask as to why there should be 2. This reason is simple. We are talking of a process which has got 2 opposite reactions, namely mixing and unmixing. Therefore, the guiding principle for the two principles of mixing and unmixing should be 2, and hence Empedocles talks of the two, namely love and hate. But then why love and hate? The idea of love and hate we can see in the case of the human being also, which acts in two diverse directions. Similarly, in the case of the formation of the world and destruction of the world, there are two diverse activities, namely coming together of the elements and moving away of the elements from one another, and hence he talks of love and hate. But then here there will be another question as to what the nature of this love and hate is. Empedocles talks of love and hate in materialistic terms and not on idealistic terms, that you must understand. The whole pattern is like this: the four elements are together in a kind of a sphere. He calls it as the spiros. Look at the slide now. In his cyclical cosmogony, the four elements combine to form the sphere, a completely homogeneous spherical body permeated by love, which, shattered by strife, grows into a cosmos with the elements forming distinct cosmic masses of earth, water, the seas and fire. It can be represented in a diagram here. This is the sphere wherein you have water, air, earth, fire, particles which are combined together forming as one whole, and this sphere he calls it as the blessed God. This sphere is called the blessed God because these four are governed by the principle of love and love alone. However, in the diagram you can see there are about some arrows which are marked facing towards the diagram. If you want, you can have a look at the diagram once again. You have the representations in the form of some arrows. I just put 4, but there are more. These arrows represent the hate principle, in the sense that when the elements are governed by love, the principle of love, they are united, they are mixed together. But when they are in that kind of a situation, what happens is, outside of this sphere of love there is hate, and the hate is constantly trying to penetrate into the sphere of love. As a result, when the penetration is much deeper, it creates a rift among the elements, and that is when the elements start splitting up. That also there is a process which Empedocles talks of, and which has been given to us as the cosmology of Empedocles, which says that when hate strikes the sphere of love, the blessed God, what happens is, first air splits, and then fire, and then earth, and then water. What happens next is, the sphere of love is completely shattered. Then at a time when love starts penetrating, you have all the four elements coming together. What happens here is, when there is division of the elements, the like particles move towards the like, namely air particles move together and form air, water particles move together and form water, earth particles move together and form earth, like that. We will have a description right now here. This is just for your understanding. The elements were in a mixed state, then they got separated. First comes air, then fire, and then earth. Water is squeezed out of the earth. You are going to have this here. See, first air, then fire, then earth, and then water. Now, what we have is this sphere of here. What happens is, this sphere of love is completely shattered. As a result, after the hate penetrates this sphere of love, the four elements are separated and the love principle of love is completely shattered.
Sir, it would be of much more help if you can throw some more light on this, sir.
Yes, Badri, your question here can be explained in the form of an animation that I will be showing now. So, now this is how the whole process takes place. That is, I must say that when hate strikes the sphere of love, first thing, the air is disturbed, the elements of air is disturbed and they form together and move away. After air, the fire particles move away. Then, as shown in the animation, the earth particles come out. So, what happens is you have fire, earth and air. Now, after the earth is formed, due to the rotation of the earth, water is squeezed out. This is how Empedocles explains, and this whole process is because of the penetration of heat. Now, is that over? According to Empedocles, this process is a cyclical process. There is no beginning and there is no end. Here, the four elements are constantly coming together and moving away. This, according to him, explains the coming together of the world. How and when? Here, he is very clear. The four particles come together and repulse from each other, and the formation of the world takes place somewhere in between the mixing and unmixing of these four. That is when you have the world. Therefore, if you look at the world, what is this world? It is nothing but the four elements, a combination of earth, water, fire, air. When the four are repulsed, it is completely governed by heat. But when once this happens, at some particular point of time, love starts to penetrate once again. When this happens, as you will see in the animation, the particles come back into the sphere of love, which means when hate penetrates, love is completely shattered. But when love starts to integrate within itself, all the elements come back to it, which means earth, water, fire, air come into it. This is the mixing and unmixing of the four elements, and explanation of this is nothing but the cosmology which Empedocles talks of, and this he talks of even with respect to perception. That we will see in the next slide. Empedocles believed that the eyes consist of earth, air, fire and water, just like everything else in nature. So, the earth in my eye perceives what is of the earth in my surrounding, the air perceives what is of the air, the fire perceives what is of fire, and the water what is of water. That is, in simple terms, it can be mentioned like this: like perceives light. We say that our eyes perceive light, ears sound. Similarly, every sense organ perceives what it is capable of. But Empedocles says that everything that exists in this world is nothing but the combination of earth, water, fire and air. Therefore, everything, every sense organ to be precise, has got all the four elements within. That is what is explained in the slide, which says that the air particles in eye perceives air, the fire particles perceives fire, the earth particles perceives earth, and water particles perceives water. Similarly, Empedocles also talks of, accepts the Pythagorean theory of transmigration of soul. With this, we come to the conclusion of the philosophy of Empedocles. To summarize his thought, in conclusion, it can be said that Empedocles tried to reconcile the theory of Parmenides, that being neither arises nor passes away, with the evident fact of change by postulating four elements. However, he failed to explain how the cyclic process of nature takes place except by taking recourse to mythological forces. If we are asked to tell what Empedocles says in a nutshell, we can say that he tried to talk of reality in a different way from that of Thales and others, because he talks of it more scientifically than them, and he, while doing so, he tried to reconcile the two different views of Parmenides and Heraclitus, which we saw earlier, where he is also trying to talk of something that is permanent and something that is changing. We see out of experience, we see that things keep changing, but beyond this change there is something that is permanent. This is the idea of Parmenides, but our experience does not tell what is existing constantly, but it only shows us what changes. How to reconcile this? That is when he brings in these 4 elements. If we are going to say like the Ionian thinkers that there is one ultimate substance which changes, then what happens to that ultimate? This is a question that remains. We do not know what is that. Then our talk of that which is permanent also gets negated. That is when the thought of Parmenides and Heraclitus has been reconciled to come to a conclusion where he talks of the 4 elements coming together. But while explaining this, it is very evident that Empedocles could not go further than what he has done, and hence he talks of the mythological forces, namely love and hate. Why he does that, we do not know. And of course, we must, one thing is sure, as I have been mentioning, the writings of these people are not available now. What we have is only the collections from people from the time of Plato and others. That is what we have right now. In his effort to reconcile the Parmenidean thought with Heraclitus' thought, he tried to postulate 4 elements which remain constantly, which are steady, but which combine together, wherein we talk of change. But how does it change? Why does it change? This he could not explain except by bringing in the mythological forces of love and hate. With this will be the highlight of the thought of Empedocles as a case for transcending metaphysics into positive science. With this we will stop with the philosophy of Empedocles, and before leaving I will give you some model questions. Explain the transition of Greek thought from metaphysics to positive science as found in the philosophy of Empedocles. Second, explain how Empedocles explains cosmology on the basis of mixing and unmixing of the 4 elements. Okay, students, thank you.
Thank you, sir.